Imagine it's 5 o'clock in the morning, you're sitting in a taxi on your way to the airport for your first big architecture presentation. You are a young architect full of energy, you're super excited, but you're also terrified. The client is extremely demanding and your boss is nervous. But you're confident. The presentation looks amazing, the diagrams look stunning, and the images are beautiful. But suddenly your phone is ringing. It's your boss.
Hi, morning. Are you on your way? The client just called. They want us to add a microclimate analysis to the presentation. Do you think you can make it before you arrive at the terminal? See you there.
Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to this brand new series about Autodesk Forma. I'm Philip. As many of you know, I'm primarily a Rhino user, so we will look at Forma from a perspective of a Rhino user. And whether you know or you don't know Forma, it doesn't matter. You just need a little bit of experience with Rhino, and the rest we will discover together. And we will see how Forma can help us to do environmental analysis for projects in early stages. So what is Autodesk Forma? Or you could also say, what is the future of architecture? The future of architecture, in my opinion, is data and collaboration. And with that comes sharing of knowledge. I think if you want to compete in that industry, these are kind of key ingredients. And Forma is really geared towards including everyone in a project's design pipeline, from architect, landscape architect, engineer, interior designer, MEP consultant, lighting designer, and so on. It's cloud-based, it's collaborative, and includes AI-powered tools which rely on data. So it really allows everyone in a project's team to understand the environmental impact of a building. It's all about making smarter decisions at the end. I'm super excited. In this first episode, we will look at the interoperability between Rhino and Forma. We will look at Forma's interface and also test a few of the tools. For a more detailed description of what we cover in this video, please check the show notes. Let's dive in. Alright, let's see if we can help our young architect. Head over to autodesk.com/products/forma and you should see an option to either sign in or to create an account. To create an account is free, and then you should also choose the country you are operating from. Now, from here you have a few options. You can start a free trial that lasts for 30 days. You can access the Forma Hub, that's when you already have a license. Or if you want to use Forma commercially, you can head over to the pricing options. Now, the good news is that Forma is free to use for educators and students. Now, if you have your license, you can head over to your Forma Hub. Now, my hub is called Philip Galvan, but you could be part of more than just one hub. That's why it says here choose hub. I'm just part of one hub at the moment, and that's how it looks inside. I archived all the projects I was working on, so we have a clean slate to start with. But you can create new projects here. You can go to a demo project, you can load a demo project. That is really useful to get an understanding from the get-go on how a Forma works. There's loads of learning resource on the bottom, and even more when you click on these arrows. There's a help button where you can contact the support, you can learn about essential workflows, ask the community, and more. You can also sign up to the newsletter, and there is a link to the YouTube channel, the community forum, the Forma blog, and the help center. On the left, you can manage hubs. Typically, you can have several hubs for different clients. That allows you to invite clients or consultants to one specific project. You could also have a hub with several projects. For example, in a studio environment, where you invite studio members to join you to collaborate together. Then you can create projects and you can invite members as, for example, consultants, and there are also hub settings. Now, regardless if we're using Rhino or not, we need to create a new project. The whole point is to be able to locate our model to a real world location. I'll go to London, that's the place where I live. By the way, this is just an example. I'm not working on any of these projects. It's this site here. That's what I want to look at. I will confirm, and now it will load all the contextual data. And it will also look for data sets which are available for this site. All right, as soon as the basic model is loaded in, you can see it opened a window asking me if I want to add more data. If we look here, we can actually see what was added to the model. It's the ESRI terrain model with a 1 meter resolution or better. This is pretty good. And it was added to the model. So that's what we actually see in our base model. But there are other options here. I want to close this because I want to show you how to get there. So this is the model at the moment. This is the site I'm looking at. Let's see. So we have this. You can see now my screen has changed completely. Where are we? So now we are inside a project. If you want to get out of a project, you just click here the Autodesk logo and we're outside the project. If we go on projects, you can see, oh, that's the recent project. I can go back in. With the right mouse button, you can rotate. With the wheel, you can zoom in and you can see there are no buildings. But yeah, we can add more data. Now, how can we add new data? On the left, you can see the proposal, because we can have several proposals for this project. There is a library, extensions, and contextual data. If I click here and browse contextual data, we get back to the window we saw earlier. From here, I can load different data sets. You can actually see what was added. We have the ESRI terrain model with 1 meter resolution. That is pretty good. Therefore, we don't need another terrain model. We can load the buildings. Just click order. Let's also load this flat terrain. That could be quite useful when modeling. We can load the roads, parcels. There's even the trees from OpenStreetMap. I guess not every site has all the data sets, but let's add what we can add. Satellite image, definitely super helpful. And there's also a map box base map. I leave it up to you to play around with these and see what suits your project. Now you can see it loaded everything into my model and my site is here just in the middle. Now under contextual data, we can see all the different data sets we loaded into the site. And you can also, if you don't need something, you can delete it here. Now you probably ask yourself, how can I turn on and off? How can I hide things if I don't want to see it? Well, we can go back to our proposal. And now the base model is what's shown here in this pink box. Currently it's an untitled base, but you can see these are all the data sets we loaded in. The buildings, the vegetation, roads, property boundaries, and the image. I want to turn off the image. You can also change the name here. I call this Canary Wharf. Alright, so far so good. I just want to point out that you have these info boxes coming out when you're hovering over things, which are super useful. So you can learn about the terrain mode, for example here, or about the base model. A base includes objects that are reused across your proposal. You can create several bases and swap between them. To add an existing object, right-click it and choose Move to Base. To create a new object, click Edit. So as you can see in my model, we have 3 buildings here, which are actually not part of my proposal. So we want to get rid of it. If I click here, right-click and Edit Base, I can edit, I can change the buildings or I can get rid of it. You can do the same by clicking here Edit Base or here Edit Base. So let's do the first one. Or I go back here. You can also change objects in your base. If you, for example, see a building which is not the correct height, then you can change that. I'll get rid of this one. I will also get rid of this one and this small one here. And when you finish, when you're done with editing, you can just click here, done. All right, so now we have a clean plate and oh, there's another small building. Let's get rid of this. Edit base and delete. Done. Now I could model my things in Rhino and bring it into here by just going to library and import. And here you can see you can import mesh objects, 2D vector, DXF files, raster images, JPEGs with a maximum of 100 megabyte. But what would be much better is to just link Forma and Rhino. And that's what we will look at now. Now, interoperability is really key in this industry. As a designer, you will use a lot of different software packages, and that's why Forma is not just part of the AEC Autodesk software collection, but you can also use it as a standalone application. And that makes it really useful for somebody like me coming from Rhino 3D. There's another button, it's called extensions. We can link Forma and Rhino, and that's what we try to do. So there's this extension called Autodesk Forma plugin for Rhino. We can just download, agree. If you click here, then it gives you an exact description, even a YouTube video on how to install it. But I will just go through very quickly. It's super easy. So I have downloaded this. I can just run it, install for all users. I'll just use that. Accept, install, finish. So let's check it out. That should work. So if I now type here Forma, it opens this small panel, and you can see here, enter project URL, select proposal. So I can go back to my Forma site. This is my current proposal. This is the selected proposal. I can just go here, copy, put this in here, and now I can select the proposal I'm working on. Load site data. Hello. This is pretty cool. Now, looking at this a bit more closely, you can see it says here load site data. You can also see that there's some error, some roads could not be created, dismiss. It's never gonna be perfect, but so far I'm pretty happy with what I have. I have everything what I see in Forma, I can also see in Rhino. You can see here, send layers to Forma. If I create something in here, I could send that back to Forma. But let's see the other way around, because I want to define my project site. We want to define a site limits. The site limits is really the area within your context model which you want to analyze. We have our context, but how do we define the site limits? Now, it turns out it's super easy in Forma. There are a few ways to do that. One is to use the site limit tool. The site limit tool, you can just click and it opens up this new toolbar where you can either freeform a site limit, or you can use the rectangle tool for a very simple one. There's an option to create a circular site limit, and you can trace an existing shape. So I could use this and click the property boundary which we loaded through the property boundary data set. We could use that, and that creates our site boundary. Or even simpler, if we double click into our base model, we can select our property line and say define a site limit. So easy, done. Now, if I go back to Rhino and I open my Forma plugin, I can reload the site data. And now I have another layer here, and I can close this, by the way, without worrying it's gone. And I have this site limit here. What a handy tool. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now I could start to model things. I want to just test it out very quickly so you can see how simple it is to link objects. And I just draw a very simple box. Nothing special, just another building. Now, it's currently in the default layer. I have a masking layer because I modeled something already, which we explore later. Now, if I go to my Forma, back to my Forma plugin, you can see it lists all the layers which are shown in my Rhino. The default layer and the masking layer. Currently my building is in the default layer. I can click this and send layers to Forma. Let's try that. Back in Forma, I just need to refresh my model, my page really, and yeah, it's already there. So that's how fast and quickly this works. Amazing. And now you can see this is not in my base model, it's the layers above together with the terrain. But going back here, you see there are a few more options. We can turn off layers from within here, because currently all the geometry you see is just a reference. It's not really inside Rhino. You can also shift this whole model in case you, for example, already built something, you already defined your origin point. You could move that and it will move the whole model. So for example, I could, if my whole Forma model would not align with my model, I could move that whole thing wherever I need to, and it it will automatically update everything. Now, I don't need that because I want to work with the location Forma provided me. There's also another way to define, before sending layers to Forma, you can also define what these layers are. If it's vegetation, constraints, and generic, but you can still change your model later on when you are in Forma. So if I go back here, you can see it now. It says it's a generic model. It says external source. Now, if I'm happy with this shape, I can keep that and say convert to 3D sketch. I can, for example, now add floors, can define how tall the floors are, can reset floors again. This has become a building. We can do more with this. We can actually give this a function and say this could be a residential building, for example. It's worth to mention that Forma automatically calculates all your area metrics. So you automatically get the building footprint area and all the GFA areas. And it even gives you the net internal areas. Pretty cool. Going back to Rhino, if I now get rid of this and reload my site, then I have my new building here. Now this has become now part of my Forma model. It's pretty easy, but let's go back to the problem.
The client just called. They want us to add a microclimate analysis to the presentation.
Now let's talk about microclimate analysis. This is really an important step for you to understand how your design interacts with the environment. And Forma automatically pulls local weather data into your model to evaluate things like airflow, humidity, temperature. And with that, it allows you to understand on how your building performs in terms of, for example, outdoor comfort, which is basically a perceived temperature. For example, orientation of buildings can influence on how a space is shaded throughout the year, and that either increases or decreases your outdoor comfort. So don't skip that step. Small adjustments at the beginning of a project can lead to big improvements afterwards. And vice versa, if you miss it, you might miss an opportunity. All right, our architect doesn't have a lot of time, so let's see if we can help her to pull this off. I was imagining a very simple scheme. We have a mixed-use development, office tower in the front next to the junction here where there's possible public transport. We have a podium with food and beverage, a retail space with food and beverage, a shopping, and a public courtyard as in kind of arrival space. And then we have an office building in the back, more towards the side streets and the neighboring residential buildings. So that could be a typical first massing study. Now, to bring this into Forma, you know already, we type in here Forma, and we just send our layers, the layers we want to send to Forma. And here again, I need to refresh the view, and here we have our first option. We're still in proposal number 1. Again, we need to do something with these massing. So the first building, it says here generic external source. We go in here and we adding floors, add floors, and I want to make the ground level a double height space, or even a bit bigger than a double height space. And we make this 8 meter, and we can assign the function. As I said before, it would be commercial if it's a hotel. Maybe let's say these are apartments in the back. It's an apartment building, so residential. All right, and then in the front, I have my office tower. Same here, I want to have a very tall first floor. Okay, same here, buildings, yeah. And function, I put this as commercial. External source again, so this is my podium. Add this here. I will make this 2 floors, make the first floor really tall, or maybe 3 floors. Yeah, I think that's okay. So then it's similar. It's the same heights as the other buildings. All right. Okay. So that's that. And now we could run. And this is so cool because now we can just very simply run our analysis. If you go here, you can see actually all the different analyses we can run at the moment. And we will talk about this more, of course. But this is really why we're here. On the right side, we have the microclimate analysis. Here is blue because I ran it before, but don't worry about that. You can run it as often as you want. Now, very quickly, before we run the analysis, there's a selection area. You can select the limits of what you want to actually test. I just changed basically the location, but that's important to understand. You can also change the radius here of how wide you want to, the test radius. And then again, what I said before, it's a description of what the microclimate analysis takes into account. You can dismiss this if you don't want to see that. I will keep it, and then you can run the analysis. And that, because it's in the cloud, it's not running on your laptop or computer, it is fairly quick. So that was not even a minute, and we have a result. So it says here now, see analysis results. It jumps to January. So we see January at 2 o'clock, and we can go in here and look at the different months, and it gives you basically an average day of each month. So there's definitely a lot to look at. At the one side, we can change the time of the day, and below that, it gives us the air temperature, and with these bars, it indicates what temperature it's likely gonna be. For example, in that case, 6 degrees the average in January at 7 o'clock, and -2 might be not very often, but for example this year was quite cold. So then you could see below that, you will see there's a wind. It says the wind analysis result aren't available yet. For now, the microclimate analysis assumes that the wind speed is 1 meter per second, fairly slow. It's still working on it, but we get a quite good idea what the perceived temperature is. The perceived temperature here shows you if people might experience slight cold stress. Actually, here it says no thermal stress for 9%, but slight cold stress for 91% of the space. Okay, let's go to a different month. Let's check July. In July, average temperature probably around 18 degrees. At 11, yeah, okay, I would agree. But then, let's say at 2 o'clock, it's much warmer. 21 degrees average. We had very hot summers, so I can imagine, if it goes up to, let's say, 27 degrees, that is very likely nowadays, also in London. Then you can see, okay, 59% is between 25 degree and 30 degree, and 41% is of the site is 30 to 35 degree, and you feel a moderate stress heat for 100% of the site. Now with that study, our architect could now very quickly take a snapshot of certain months. I would, for example, go for January, average, let's say afternoon, when people just go back from lunchtime. What could be the situation? I can do the same then for April, and every time I change it, I can take a snapshot here. I can take a picture, and I can save the camera. First of all, I can save the camera position. That's very handy, but I can also capture images. Okay, for example, I go to January, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I go to the most likeliest temperature in that case. So we can capture the screen. And we can also capture the screen with the graphics, so we actually have all this information on our picture. And if I look at this, so that is the version without graphics, and this is the version with graphics. Now with that, our architect can go now through either each month or each season. For example, here March, can understand spring at the same time, make a picture, go into summer, take a picture to understand what are the areas which are comfortable, which are not. For example, on the roof, it might be quite hot. On the podium, there are some nice areas which are probably very comfortable. I can then go to September, in autumn, still quite comfy, and back to December. So Annie's our architect. She arrives at the airport with the microclimate analysis in the pocket, and just when she thinks everything will be fine, her boss calls again.
Can you add vegetation to the site? Show how trees might reduce wind exposure and improve outdoor comfort?
We can certainly add vegetation to the site. That's not a big problem. But before we do that, I just want to point out that you can always go back. If you did an analysis before, you can always go back in the history and reopen that. So as you can see here, the last one was the 30th of January. I can go into the last one here, and now you think, wow, that has changed a lot. The reason is that Forma has finished the wind analysis, is now part of that microclimate analysis. I want to I don't want to talk too much about the wind because that should be really a bigger part in one of the next videos. Wind analysis is a real big topic, and it's very big in outdoor comfort, and that's why Forma automatically adds the wind analysis to the microclimate. As soon as you start the microclimate analysis, it also starts the wind analysis, which makes total sense. Now going back here again, and you can see what analysis has ran before. You can see that there's this blue little dot here, and you can look at the wind analysis separately just from the microclimate analysis. And it gives you data about the comfort, the wind comfort. Now again, I don't want to go too much into detail. I just want to point that out. Going back here, we can see now that by adding the wind factor, because earlier, as we knew, the wind was calculated with 1 meter per second, which was kind of unlikely, really. So it gives you a probability of the wind direction and the wind speeds during certain hours of the day. So that's just on top of the humidity, temperature, sun exposure, and so on. Another thing I haven't really explained earlier was that you can turn off here the roof, for example, and only look at the ground level. And vice versa, you can turn off the ground level, just look at the roof. All right, let's add vegetation. But we will not just add vegetation to our proposal. We will create a new proposal. We will duplicate the proposals. We can compare the two. I can just go here on these 3 little dots, duplicate. I can say duplicate. I can also change here the name because now it's a copy. Proposal 2, vegetation. Now what we can do here, we can add vegetation. You can add vegetation again through Rhino, but what I like here is actually directly working in Forma because it's just so simple. You can add a tree line and you can add an area with trees. Well, let's just do that. I want to add an area with green here in the courtyard. Just zoom in here. Oops, area with trees. And it's just sketching roughly where that could be. It's maybe a small park, and you can press enter to complete this. Now it creates this funny little trees here. Remember, it's about this being a diagram. You can change the height of the vegetation. I would say these could be definitely a bit higher, maybe 8 meters and 5 meters width. That sounds good. So that's one. We can also add trees in a line. That's super handy, especially for street trees. So I'm just playing here a bit. And you have the option here to arrange it along the middle line, the line you just drew, or inside or outside that line. Or let's say a line left or right. And you can define how far, how big the offset should be. Let's say 1 meter to the left or to the right. In my case, it's fine to be on the center. And the height, I would say, should be around 8 meters as well, or even bigger, 12. 8. 10 meters, I think that's fine. And I will do the same on the other side. I ran the microclimate analysis on proposal number 2 and also waited for the wind analysis to finish. So we can compare proposal number 2 and proposal number 1 under the same conditions. Just very quickly on the wind. And we will go into wind analysis in much more detail in one of the next videos. But just for you to understand, there are 2 modes. One is the detailed wind analysis, which is the one which takes longer. And then we have the rapid wind analysis, which is a real-time prediction of wind conditions. But going back to the microclimate analysis, I go in here in the view history and will open the latest microclimate analysis with the wind data now on the proposal number 2. And by the way, you can always change any analysis here in that drop-down menu. So for example, you could go into the wind analysis and look at the streamlines. That's pretty cool. Let's go back. Now, if we want to compare things, we can just click here on compare, and it opens a second window where we can choose the proposal number 1 microclimate. It jumps automatically to the same camera location, camera angle, same date, same time, same temperature, same wind direction. Now, you can see there's not a lot of difference. Actually, it's really marginal. But so if you look at here the ground level, you can compare the ground level. The thermal comfort indices, UTCI says no thermal heat stress. Here on that side, where we have less trees, 1% of the site has moderate heat stress. So it's very little difference. But the devil lies in the detail. It's 21 degrees. That means it's an optimum. So you could argue, what if it's much hotter? Is there a difference? Or if it's much colder, does it matter? I guess I would add more trees and more vegetation to have a bigger impact, but that's a way on how you could compare different scenarios. Annie, our architect, added everything to the presentation. The microclimate analysis with vegetation, and the comparison of the two. She's about to board the aircraft. Her boss never showed up, but sent her a text message.
Hey, I'm taking another flight. Can you ensure to add a noise pollution study to the deck?